Okay, well, welcome to this event tonight, organised by Shape Arts, who's celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And the talk will be between Tony Heaton, CEO of Shape Arts, and internationally renowned artist Yinka Shonibare, who needs no introduction. We'll start with the conversation bit, and then later on we'll be able to ask your questions, so please try and save them towards the end. And also welcome to our online viewers who are streaming this via This Is Tomorrow. And you'll be able to tweet your questions directly to, at Shape Arts. And the HD version of this talk will be on online at sometime next week towards the end. So I'll leave it there, and I'll pass it over to Tony, who's going to start with this conversation.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks very much, and welcome everybody. It seems strange to welcome you to Yinka's project space when he sat next to me. So on Yinka's behalf, I'll say welcome anyway. And he told me when we opened last Thursday that it's Shape space for the duration of the Shape Open. So it's kind of our space, so I think I can say welcome. And I also just wanted to say quickly, for those of you that weren't here, we opened last Thursday. We had over 200 people come through the private view. It was incredibly packed in here. And I think we had a great night. Do you agree, Yinka?
Yes, no, it was very good.
It was a good night, wasn't it?
Yes.
And we were really pleased about it at Shape. And Yinka was able to award the Judges' Prize to an artist called Kate Murdoch. And her work is just it's the pink figure just behind Sarah, who is tweeting all about what we're doing tonight. So don't think she's ignoring us on her mobile phone. So that's the piece that won. And we have that piece there. We have a People's Choice. So you get the choice at the end of the evening, or if you want to come back at another time, to select the work that you think should win. And at the end of the exhibition, we have a People's Choice. I should say Kate won a cheque for £1,000, and the People's Choice winner gets a cheque for £250. And you can stick your votes in that box at the back there if you want to make a choice. Okay. I also wanted just to take a moment to say thank you to Ben Fredericks, who introduced the night and who's at the back. So we work as a team at Shape, so everybody gets stuck in, lots of shapers around the room. But Ben leads on the Shape Open, so this is his exhibition. He organised this event, and so a personal thanks to you, Ben, for doing that. Thank you. And I also just wanted to say thank you to Yinka for his generosity in providing this space and for agreeing to take part in this talk tonight. And not just for Shape, but this space Yinka opens up to artists who make a suggestion and it becomes a public space. And I think that's a huge act of generosity in an age when everybody's out to make money or everybody's out to, make a book out of everybody. So I think that sort of democratic approach to giving people an opportunity, it should be applauded. And I think more people should be doing it. So thank you on behalf of us, Yinka, as our patron, but also thank you on behalf of all those artists who benefit from getting an opportunity. All right, yeah, exactly. All right, we had over 300 people wanted to get into here tonight. So you're the lucky ones who were quick on the draw, because I think almost all the tickets went within 2 hours. And we held a few tickets back for people who we knew would want to come but were out of the country. But basically, you got in early, so well done for being decisive. And if we'd have thought it was going to be this popular, we'd have charged you all a tenner. But don't worry, it's not too late. All right. We should start. Yinka, I could spend all night sort of going through the list of your achievements and the things that you've done over the last, I don't know, what would you say, 20 years or so. But I'm not going to do that, or they wouldn't get to ask any questions. But the talk is called Becoming an Artist. So I really just wanted to start at the beginning, really. What was it that made you want to be an artist? Where did it start?
Well, many things, really. I think being an artist for me, I think primarily started as an act of rebellion. I wanted to do things that my parents wouldn't understand. No, but on a more serious note, I enjoyed art when I was at school, and I didn't really think it was possible to make a proper career. I mean, I thought I would be, I'd have a studio, and then part-time I'd teach, and that would be it, but I'd do something that I really enjoyed. My background, as you know, it's a Nigerian background. I grew up in Nigeria. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. Yeah. And in Nigeria, you're not expected to study art. Mm-hmm. You're meant to be an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, but not an artist.
Believe me, in the north of England, you're not expected to be an artist either. So your family imagined Yinka the lawyer or Yinka the accountant, not Yinka the international artist?
Well, I mean, to paint a clear picture for you, my father was a corporate lawyer, and the eldest brother is a urologist. Yeah. My sister is a dentist, and I have a younger brother who's a banker.
Sounds like a great family. I could use people like that.
And of course, my mom supported everything. She looked after us. Yeah. But yes, so the expectations to do something professional, like a doctor or lawyer, was quite high.
Yeah. I was thinking, I read recently something that the philosopher John Gray said, and he sort of suggested that most people do not plan the most important decisions they make in their lives. That a lot of unplanned circumstances bring them to where they are now. Does that resonate with you in any way, or did you really sort of have the game plan all sorted out, knew which college you were going to go to?
Not necessarily. I mean, but I know that when I was a teenager, I did write poetry and I went for walks. So, I had that teenage angst and I wanted to change the world. Yeah. But other than wanting to change the world as a teenager, I didn't really have a plan as such.
Can you remember deciding which art college you wanted to attend, or was that something that just came about?
When I was at college, well, I had two choices. I applied to go to Wimbledon School of Art and also Brighton. Mm. And but I was at school in Andover at the time, and that's kind of outside London. Yeah.
Yes.
And then I was accepted at Wimbledon. So, and I wanted to be in London, of course. So yeah. I chose Wimbledon.
Yeah. And that was a good move in retrospect.
Yes and no.
Okay. The Wimbledon contingent in the audience, think about that.
Well,
and you went on to Goldsmiths, didn't you?
Yes, I did my MA at Goldsmiths, yeah. And then I did my first degree at Shaw School of Art. Oh, yeah. And Shaw is now part of Central St. Martin's.
Yeah. Yeah. When I look at students' work, I can often, it's clear who they're influenced by. And I wondered, when you were a student, because I've not seen any of your student work, what would I have spotted in there? The influences in your work?
Well, I mean, I went through many periods, like most people do.
Yeah.
And my blue period, my red period, no. But, well, I was passionate about the Impressionists to begin with. So I liked Cézanne, I liked, and I looked at, Monet, and Manet. I looked at some, and then I was also passionate about some of the French artists. You know, I was very keen on people like Delacroix and Ingres and all of those people. And then I got obsessed by the surrealists, you know, Salvador Dali. I'm sure we've all had a Dali moment.
Yeah.
And then when I went to art school, I realized that actually art wasn't just about painting, you know, and then I started to see the relationship between the different disciplines within culture. And I realized that art actually was an umbrella that all of those disciplines can come under. So, you know, in short, I became very politicized when I was at, I discovered politics.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think all good art is political somehow. When I'm thinking about or looking at art, was it the sort of politics of I'm trying to think of the right word, but the politics of injustice, or was it the politics of power that was the thing that really captured you?
Well, I mean, you know, where do I start?
Well,
I think that activism became central to my practice. You know, like everybody else, I looked around me and I saw that the world wasn't exactly fair.
yeah.
And particularly Britain in the 80s and during the Thatcher years, you know,
Yes.
seemed at the time a bit harsh. You know, things were being cut, and the gap between the rich and the poor was getting, you know, wider and wider. And a lot of artists kind of rebelled against this. You know, and I actually think a lot of very strong art and very powerful art was made in that period. There was a lot of political awareness, and no one really prioritized, you know, being wealthy. You know, it was more about what you could do. What social contribution could you make? Now, don't get me wrong, you know, I can be a good capitalist, but that's not, I see capitalism as a vehicle. In other words, I believe in social enterprise.
Yes.
So I think it's important to have those skills, but, you know, the 80s was, and 90s, you know, that was a painful period for many.
Yes. I mean, it could be now, though, couldn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, absolutely.
You talk about Thatcher, and really, I mean, you know, you can take out Thatcher and put in Cameron and put in Osborne, really, can't you?
Well, absolutely, and I think that, you know, I mean, that does bring me to, anyway, so the beginning of the work and how the work evolved. Also, a lot of racism, sexism, homophobia, you name it, you know, I mean, things I saw on television openly.
Yes.
In the 80s and the 90s. I'd lived in Nigeria as a child. I did not, in fact, understand the concept of racism.
Right.
And I lived in the context of everybody being black, so I didn't really see that, you know, there would be a need to discriminate against a person because of the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And in fact, you know, there were a number of very active movements in terms of, you know, black art and feminist art, and the disability arts movement. I don't know if you remember about Disability Arts magazine.
I do indeed.
You know, and it was a very strong vocal movement.
Well,
and that's the context, because, you know, I talk about all those because it's important for people to see how the work evolved and what was happening around me when I was actually trying to make my work.
yeah. I mean, thinking back, Disability Arts in London, the Disability Arts magazine, was the only vehicle I think disabled artists had back in the 80s to get a sense of what was going on in the world. And it's hard to believe now, you know, with the internet and instant, you know, Twitter, things were being live streamed tonight. And it's amazing to think that, you know, disabled people all over the country would wait for this rather strangely elongated envelope to drop through the door. Not quite every month, but not quite. I'm laughing at Colin Hambrook, who's the editor of it, who sat in the audience, because, you know, it never appeared on time. And some issues, we were looking back numbers, and there were one or two issues that skipped numbers, so we were searching for an edition that didn't actually exist. Very interesting. But that was the only way that disabled artists would get to know what other disabled artists were doing back then. And I guess, I mean, we're talking more about disability, I guess, because disability is, you know, we're a disability-led organisation. So it feels right that we should spend some time looking at that. But I guess prejudice, discrimination, oppression cuts across all so-called minority groups, and you know, that's the sort of thing you were experiencing.
Yes, and I mean, funny enough, you did say something earlier about, you know, you did say to me you didn't want the talk to be academic. You didn't want to talk about academic things.
Only because I can't.
Okay. You know, these things are very important. When I was at college, okay, so I saw the injustice around the world, and I wanted to do something about it. And then I discovered, in fact, that I wasn't the only person wanting to do something about it.
Yeah.
Now, if we go back into history, Marxism was about class struggle.
Yes.
So Karl Marx also wanted to do something about it.
Yes.
But then that became problematic because the issue there was about the dictatorship of the proletariat. In other words, almost being as bad as the people you're trying to criticize. That did not entirely work out. But then I realized, actually, okay, so wanting to do something about injustice, you know, there were other people, philosophers, who wanted also to do something about injustice. And those people then said, okay, actually, our oppression is based on the language that we use,
Yes.
and the language that describes us. So and then when I was at college, I discovered continental theory. So I discovered a number of French philosophers who were actually looking at the language that we're using
Derrida.
and challenging that language. So there are people like Derrida, there are people like Baudrillard.
Yes.
And of course, a book that had a strong impact on me was a book called Black Face, White Mask by Frantz Fanon.
Right.
And so, you know, I realized that actually one can then start to challenge the language that we're using. So am I clear so far?
Yes. Well, I was thinking about you talking about Victorian values or Thatcherism and that return to Victorian values. And of course, there were social reformers at that time who were battling against the political oppression of the time. But they oppressed also, didn't they, in a paternalistic way. So there was a sort of oppression coming in from both the exploitation of, the political exploitation of people, but also social reformers who could equally oppress. Yeah.
Yes. But you see, the position I took, and that's the position I still take today, that I can't start to look like my so-called oppressor. So I can't have this oppositional position,
Yes.
black and white. Therefore, ambivalence is required. Now, within art, you can do that.
Yes.
If you're a politician, that's more difficult.
Yeah.
Because you either provide money for housing or you don't.
Yes. And you need to take a side.
Yes, but art is poetic. Art is a form of poetry. So art allows you thinking and questioning.
Yeah.
And that is the position I take.
I always enjoy the humour and the sort of there's a subversiveness in your work, and I've only just really connected that into your statement that you said I'm quite happy to be a capitalist, or quite happy with capitalism.
Yeah.
But you mean social entrepreneurialism, I guess.
Yeah.
People searching out the thing that they can do, and setting out goals and.
No, you see, one thing you have to realize is that I think money is a political issue. And I think that being poor is a form of oppression. And I think that you need to take the power that oppresses you, and you need to understand the system. Otherwise, you will remain oppressed.
So and the power comes with the money, I guess, doesn't it? Because if you are, thinking about us as disabled people, we face oppression because often disabled people live in poverty. And if you have the money to lift yourself out of poverty, then the disabling things that, the barriers that are out there, it's a lot easier to remove many of those barriers if you have power and rank.
No, absolutely. And, when I started this space, the idea was actually to support the enterprise of other artists. So that there are no grants attached to the space.
No.
The artists come in, they have to do their own marketing and they have to promote their own work. They have the space for a month.
Yes.
If they grab that opportunity by the horns, they will invite as many people to see their show.
Yep.
And possibly attract, people who might buy their work.
Yep.
And so on. So yes, to provide the conditions for enterprise.
Yes.
But not to spoon feed people.
No, indeed. It's the fish and the fishing rod syndrome,
Yes.
I guess, isn't it?
Now, what I do is on a very, very small scale.
Yeah.
I do understand that. But it's the principle of it that counts.
Yeah. How do you get other artists to sign into the sort of model that you're promoting here then? Because you must meet lots of influential peers who could do similar things to you. Or is that not the sort of conversation you would have with us?
Well, people do things in their own way. Most of the artists of my generation, the people I went to Goldsmiths with, and, we're all constantly asked to donate to charity,
Sure.
Literally almost every week.
Yeah.
And so a lot of artists, in fact, are quite generous. They may not do it in the way that I do it, but a lot of them give, very expensive pieces of works to auction.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands. And I think most of the artists I know have to do that because they're constantly approached, and they do it.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to get away with it tonight if I didn't tell everybody that it was Shape's 40th anniversary this year. So this is one of our 40th anniversary activities.
Yes.
And I know that maybe people in the room won't realise, and I know it's not, that you might not talk about it a lot with the more academic people that might sit here and ask you questions, but you were part of the SHAPE family, weren't you? So I'm sort of outing Yinka as being part of the SHAPE family. He was a shaper at one point in his life. When was that? In the 1980s, 1990s?
Well, it's in '02 more like it.
Is it? Really?
No, just joking.
I don't know when it was.
No. I left Goldsmiths in 1991.
Yep.
And I was living in Battersea at the time. And Battersea Art Centre, is not too far from where I used to live.
Yeah.
And I volunteered with SHAPE at Battersea Art Centre.
Yeah.
There was a SHAPE officer working in Battersea.
Yeah.
And then she moved on to another job, and I applied for her post.
Right.
And then I ended up working for SHAPE for 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And while I was working for SHAPE, because I only work 3 days a week, I carry on doing my art.
Yeah.
And actually, it was at that time that I had to give up my day job to become a full-time artist, because I got the Paul Hamlin Award, which was about £30,000.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And then, the rest is history, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So when you left SHAPE, did they get you a cake and a cup of tea like we do now?
Well, no, I think I can't even remember what they got me.
Good. I was going to say, for God's sake, don't say, they gave me a cheque for 100 quid and that sort of, or all the staff will be giving me a hard time because they only get a cake and a cup of tea.
But you see, this is why I'm actually very grateful to SHAPE, because SHAPE gave me a job, right?
Yeah.
SHAPE gave me a part-time job. And it was up to me then to take all the opportunity.
Yes.
Because then I had a studio.
Yeah.
With the money from that job, I was able to pay for my studio space.
Yeah.
And then it was up to me to make the most of that
Yes.
opportunity.
Yeah, no, I can see that. What was SHAPE like in those days?
Well,
Paint us a little picture of the organisation.
Well, Maggie Woolley
was the director.
was the director of SHAPE.
Yeah, I know Maggie Woolley.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Maggie Woolley, I'm sure she'll say that herself, didn't take nonsense from anyone. If you were very good at your job, you got high praise.
Yeah.
But if you were not so good at your job, then that might be slightly tricky.
Right, really. Okay, shapers, take note.
But she was very good. I mean,
Yeah.
and that discipline, stayed with me, up until now.
No, that's great. I mean, it is about utilising the opportunities that come your way. All opportunities there, isn't it?
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, if you get opportunities, you have to make the most of them.
Yeah. The partnership with art dealers always seems shrouded in mystery somehow. So I know one time when we were talking, I think you said that you'd been with Stephen Friedman Gallery for over 20 years. Is that?
For 20, yeah.
Yeah. How does a relationship like that come about?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like being married.
Well, I thought that when I was thinking about the questions. I thought that's a crazy thing to say to Yinka. I can't possibly say, is it a bit like being married? So I'm really glad you said that.
No, it is like being married. It's give and take. I mean, art dealers are not galleries. They're not charities. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
You have your own part to play, and they have their own part to play.
Yeah.
And if you're meeting their deadlines,
Yes.
you're not messing about.
Yeah.
They will work for you.
Yeah.
But you have to be prepared to make a contribution.
Yeah.
And then they will make a contribution.
So professional approach.
Yes.
Deliver the goods.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a business, isn't it? It's business.
It's a business, but it does also have a social function. you know, it's certainly not a business like the grocery store
No.
or because you have to, you know, bear in mind that actually a lot of the museums do go to the commercial galleries first. And the art world is set up in a very, I mean, there are many interesting levels in the art world. You know, you have the, you know, artist-run spaces. Then you have, you know, the writers, you know, who write about the arts in magazines. Now, you must never underestimate the writers because they actually make your work visible.
Yes.
And the galleries might actually look at an art, they might look at an art magazine and see that you've been written about. And then, of course, you have the museums. But you have different levels of being sort of supported. So if your work, if you've shown your work, that's also why I did this space. If your work has been seen, somebody may well then write about it, if that goes into magazines. And then everyone starts talking about the work. And then the commercial galleries suddenly become very interested. And then they pick you up. And then the museums go to the commercial galleries to, you know, they might pick you up either from an exhibition you've done directly or mostly from the commercial galleries. And museums work very well with commercial galleries. So there's a kind of a link.
Yes.
And then the museums kind of, you know, they kind of support your work. And you get that rubber stamp from the museums.
Yes.
And then your profile goes up.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of all different levels. And of course, the various awards as well. And then you've got the Arts Council, you know, the grant-giving bodies as well. If they support you, you may, you know, then end up in a gallery. You know, and with my career, you know, in the past, when I was living in Battersea, I'd received grants from Wandsworth Council. In those days, the councils used to give out grants to artists, and also London Arts Board, you know, and the Arts Council.
Yeah.
And then when I've made shows abroad, you know, I've also been supported by the British Council.
Yes.
You know, so there are kind of, so you've basically got the career of an artist, I think primarily being supported first by the public sector.
Yes.
And then the private sector comes in, the commercial galleries. But public, as it happens actually, the public purse, the public sector, usually makes the initial investment, which is what happened to me, because I got a grant to go to college, and that was essentially supported by the public purse.
Yes.
But the people who benefit the most are the commercial galleries.
Yes.
Because the initial investment is made by the public purse.
Yes.
But I think the two things work together, because then you get supported by the commercial galleries, but then once you've done that, then the taxman is incredibly happy indeed. So the money then goes back into the public purse. So, you know, it does work.
We call it the virtuous circle at Shape, where things move around that circle. But it is a complicated web and network of connections in many ways. And certainly one of the things that we try to do at Shape and when we work with artists is to explain it's not just about being able to produce really great work. You've also got to be able to, you know, manage the business side of being an artist as well, and the networking and the professional way that you present your work, the way you talk about yourself to encourage other people to talk about you.
Most of the very successful artists historically, you know, were business people.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Hogarth was the first YBA.
Yeah.
You know, he was a very serious businessman. He used to sell his prints, you know, for a lot of money. And I don't think you can be a very successful artist if you don't have a business acumen.
Yeah.
Because for a start, you're not going to have a studio. I mean, you can do it without the conveniences, and you can freeze to death if you like. But if you're serious about looking after yourself and looking after the people around you, then you have to know business.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about a work called Effective Defective Creative,
Yes.
which is a video installation. I think you made it in the year 2000.
Yeah.
It's in the Science Museum now.
Yeah.
Whenever I visit with young people in my family who often want to go to the Science Museum, I make a point of taking them to see this work. And
As it happens, a lot of people don't know that.
I know.
That I worked with science, and I
know,
did.
which is really why I wanted to ask you a question about that particular work.
That's my secret work.
It is.
And you've uncovered my
I'm outing you.
my secret work at the Science Museum.
Yeah, which I think is incredibly powerful, but it's quite different from your subsequent work, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I was doing everything simultaneously. I was, I was doing a bit of what I do now then too.
Yeah. Was it a commission piece or?
Yes, the Welcome. It was the Welcome Commission.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know what the work is, I spoke with a number of pregnant women, and I was given permission by them to use scans of their pregnancy in a work of art.
Yeah.
And I did that alongside a surgeon, so there was a doctor available when I spoke with them. And some of the women were expecting, I mean, in some way, their fetuses were described as having, I don't quite know, I'm just thinking of the right language, being different. And they had to decide whether they wanted to keep their babies or not. And so, and then I made this series of scans, really, kind of moving scans. And so the first set of them, I put them in a grid form. So you see quite a few, I can't remember how many screens now. And so the first set, it says effective at the top.
Yes.
And so those embryos were considered, quote unquote, normal.
Yes.
And then second set of screens are called defective. Those were considered, quote unquote, not normal. And then the third set of screens that come up says creative, so they're kind of mixed together. And I think the screens were mixed together, and I think the point I was trying to make at the time is that actually without diversity, you cannot have creativity without diversity.
Yeah.
And so, if we're all kind of made of the same mold, I mean, that society would be incredibly dull and boring.
Yes.
And that work, in fact, was meant to be a very temporary piece. It was a kind of a welcome show.
Right.
But then the Science Museum, I guess, they decided to keep it as a permanent piece.
Yeah.
So it's been there. I think it was made, possibly it was 1990, no, 2002 or something.
2000, I think.
2002, maybe.
Yeah.
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 Well, thanks. Has everybody seen that piece, or is that? Will everybody be rushing off to the Science Museum now to go and have a look at it? I do suggest you do anyway. I wanted to ask you: do you like commissioned work or competitions, or not?
Well, I don't like competitions, that's for sure. I don't like those, no. The fourth plinth was a competition.
Yeah.
I've been dragged into a few competitions, but, screaming, but not, not because I wanted to.
Yeah.
Quite a number of them, in fact, yeah.
I mean, the fourth plinth work is, well, it's an amazing piece of work. And of course, now it's down at the Maritime Museum, isn't it? At
Yes.
Greenwich. And I think it's permanently there, isn't it?
Yes.
permanent
yes.
piece outside there. And I guess that's where I was going with the do you like competitions, or that must have been incredibly rewarding. I don't mean financially rewarding, but a rewarding thing to
No, it was
win.
financially rewarding
Well,
as
I'm
well.
sure it was. Well, which came. Do you feel more proud of the financial reward that you got from it, or the fact that it was in Trafalgar Square? You know, one of the great, tourist hotspots in one of the greatest cities in the world. How long was it there for?
That's a difficult one, actually.
A few years, wasn't it?
Money, Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
That's difficult, actually.
Well, do you take the money in the handy? Do you think what opportunities opened up to me from having that piece of work in Trafalgar Square?
Well, I mean, showing on the fourth plinth is, it's amazing.
It is.
I mean,
yeah.
you suddenly have loads of cab driver friends, Well, the story about that, actually, I'd never actually done public sculpture. I mean, I like to be diverse. I mean, that was my first public sculpture. I do more public sculpture now.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got 3, in London at the moment.
There's the wave, isn't there?
But
wind.
I'd never yet done public sculpture.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who was going to, who I was going to be in the competition with.
Yeah.
And so imagine somebody who's never actually done it before. So the letter came through. I wanted to know who was going to be in it. I looked at the lists, and I saw Anish Kapoor, Anthony Gomley, Tracy Emin, Jeremy Della. I thought, okay, do I really want to do, But, so that kind of gave me a little bit of a fright, actually, I have to admit, at that point. I mean, now I'm more confident, doing public sculpture, but at that time I'd never done it.
Yeah.
And, but luckily, anyway, my proposal kind of got through. Yeah. And,
The rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great list of moments in your career, isn't there? I was thinking about the Sensation exhibition, the fourth plinth, your exhibition at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which I think was. I always think the Yorkshire Sculpture Park is a really important place to be seen. Venice Biennale, and of course you were nominated for the Turner Prize. I just wondered, out of all those, and maybe there's ones that you think were more powerful, but the paradigm shifts, the things that really changed, the world for you. Were there any sort of, when you see those in time, did you think, okay, that was a real change maker for me, winning that or having that exhibition or producing that fourth plinth piece of work?
I think actually the moment that really kicked off everything, I think for me, was I was invited to show in a space called Independent Art Space in Chelsea at the time. And my work was in the space. A friend had invited me to show there. And so I was in a group show. And I was very excited because it was a show about contemporary abstraction, and and as Bridget Riley was in that show, there were other people in the show, and Charles Saatchi walked into the space, and he touched my work with a magic wand. He bought my work, and at that time, Charles Saatchi was one of the most important collectors in the world.
Yes.
And in the 90s, Charles Saatchi, even looking at your work, meant a lot. And the world has changed now, of course, and after he wanted to buy my work, Stephen Friedman also came to that show.
Yeah.
And Stephen Friedman asked me if I wanted to join his gallery. And so I think for an artist, that's huge, because before that period, I was having to do all of my own admin, sending, in those days you send slides,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
sending my slides to people. And I was starting to get a lot of demand, people wanted slides, they wanted, so half the time
Yeah.
I was dealing with the admin,
Yes.
and I couldn't really focus on my practice,
Yeah.
But when I joined the gallery, it made a huge difference, because the galleries would go to about 3 art fairs a year,
Yes.
and they would take your work to art fairs.
Yeah.
That meant, you could pay the bills, and then you could comfortably, make more work without worrying about paying the bills.
Yeah. And they dealt with a lot of the admin, I guess, as
Yes.
well, didn't they?
So that moment was
Yeah.
was a real trigger. Then,
Yes.
of course, then I was in Sensation, just after that.
Yeah.
And also, the piece I did on the London Underground, Diary of a Victorian Dandy, was seen by a lot of people, and that was in the Paul Hamlin Award. But when I left Goldsmiths College, actually, the first show I did, or I was part of, was at the Serpentine Gallery.
Yeah.
That was Barclay's Young Artist Award. So that was also a very important thing. So, Barclay's Young Artist Award, and then Stephen Friedman Gallery and Charles Ajibai and the work. And Sensation, was also very important. And then most importantly, Turner nomination was phenomenal. Yeah.
The heat of that at the time must have been intense. Looking back at it, it does look kind of amazing, doesn't it, how all that falls into place. I wanted to move to the Tate Gallery, but not to your work in the Tate Gallery, but to a talk that I attended. You were on the panel, and I asked some of the staff team what they would like to ask you, and Fiona also wanted to know the answer to this, but you described disability arts as the last remaining avant-garde at that talk.
Yeah.
I wondered, is that still the case? And which artists are at the cutting edge of the movement, do you think?
I talked about disability arts as the last avant-garde because I felt that it possibly remains the kind of last taboo, possibly. And also that it's not being adopted by the mainstream in the same way. That's not a negative thing, by the way.
No.
To still have the opportunity to be on the edge, to be,
Yes.
I think, because mainstream can be very boring.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and I think that, disability is very diverse and very varied. So I'm cautious about lumping everybody together as
Yes.
being under the umbrella of disability arts. But, I've addressed disability in my work. It's an aspect of my identity, but it's not all been solely about my disability. As many disabled people are diverse too, and will want to address a number of other issues in their work.
Yeah.
Humanity is rich. But from the political standpoint, I feel very strongly that there's a lot of room in disability arts to do something creative and challenging.
Yeah. Now, Carl in our finance team, and remember he's in our finance team, he wanted to know why many of your figures don't have heads.
Well,
And I said I'd
that
ask.
started as it was a rebellious act, really.
Right.
Because I knew that I could not physically behead people because that would be, I would end up in jail if I did that. And it also started off as a joke about the French Revolution.
Yeah.
And also a refusal to fix people racially,
Yes.
and that's kind of why.
Well, I'm glad I asked, because it means I'll get paid this month. And I sort of want to draw things to a close, and I know there's sort of two things I wanted to touch on really quickly. But I know, looking to the future, you've got a 1418 now commission, which is with the British Library and Turner Contemporary, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, Margaret, yeah.
Which is, and it's. I suppose the question really is, and it's not just because of the new commission, because a lot of your earlier work, there's a big team you need to pull together now to make some of the bigger works, some of the tableaux, some of the, technically challenging works. And I just wondered, do you enjoy that, managing that team, or setting out the work? And I just wondered how that changed for you from a sort of fairly independent artist to a orchestrator of a set of skills, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think that the scale of works and the expectations now from artists are huge. Spaces are getting bigger. The schedule of shows are crazy. I mean, there are many more, museums around the world.
Yes.
You're doing, I work with 5 galleries, for example, internationally. Each one of them will do 2 or 3 art fairs a year.
Yes.
You can't, do all that by yourself.
Yeah.
And then, over time, my own ambition has kind of got bigger and bigger, and I want to realize, very interesting, complex things. So I need people with a number of skills to help me realize all those things. And I still work intimately. For example, at the moment, I'm doing lots of work on paper. So I still do the kind of intimate kind of art, but of course, as you know, a lot of the sort of, Renaissance artists had large studios.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The master will come and just maybe paint in the face.
Yeah.
And then,
And are you enjoying that sort of moment of coming in and painting the face?
Well, I think that obviously it's, you're working with a group of people. It's a collaboration. You're constantly talking to people. They give you ideas. You learn from them. They learn from you. And I much prefer that way of working than the lonely artist in the studio. I'm constantly surrounded by people.
Yes.
And I thrive better
In that collaborative process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it depressing, those studios with long, dark corridors with nobody around. I can't do that for too long.
No. This is perhaps a good question to end our conversation on. And it's from Fiona, who wanted to know, what is your proudest achievement?
Wow. In art?
Well, I think you could, if you wanted to open it up, you could open it up. Either in art or outside of art.
It's incredibly difficult.
It is.
Incredibly difficult. But I think my proudest achievement is to demonstrate that your one's race or disability should not stop progress. You can cut the bullshit.
Cut through the barriers.
And just take what you want to take. You have to work hard for it, but don't believe the bullshit. Don't let anyone tell you can't do anything. And I think primarily that's what I've done. So I think that would be my greatest achievement.
Not listening to people who tell you what you can't do.
Well, there was a lot of talk when I first started out in the art world. Oh, black artists can't get anywhere. The black artists can't show with commercial galleries. Oh, disabled artists can't do this. Disabled artists can't do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's my the thing I'm most proud of.
Yinka, thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
I'd forgotten you were all here. So, but it does give me an opportunity to say, if you want to ask some questions, Yinka is going to stick around for some questions. And I thought what I'd try and do is take a few questions at a time so that Yinka can sift through that and work your way through it. And people are always shy, but Ben's going to say a few words before we do that.
Okay, the microphone is going to be, there's going to be one this side and one this side, so please wait until you've got the microphone and hold it as close to your face as you can. And
who wants to ask questions? I've got one question here. Anybody else want to ask questions? I've got a few coming on Twitter. We're being really technical tonight, so people can tweet in. So anybody else want to ask a question? Don't be shy. When I do this, people then wait till the end of the evening. Everybody's hands shoot up when I said it's the last question. So I'm going to give you one off Twitter. To what extent would you say art is a vehicle for social activism? There's a question over here. Okay, yeah, go and fire away.
I was wondering if you ever felt like the commercial market pushed your work into a place that felt more commercial, or if you had enough sort of public sector backing that you never had to go in that direction.
And I'm going to take this question from this young guy here.
Wow.
Dexter wants to know, what is the relationship with curators in that sense? Do you work with a new one for each show, or do you have someone who you work with more long term?
Okay. Have you got that?
So yeah, so
Good.
the three questions.
Yes.
Do you want to? I should take them one at a time.
Yep. Okay.
It's hard to remember all three. So
No,
you
that's okay. If you're happy to take them one at a time, then why don't you take
The first,
this one and
yeah.
we'll come back to the one on
What's the
on
first
Twitter.
one? I think I'll take them one at a time. It's easier for me.
Okay.
So what was the first one then?
What extent would you say art is a vehicle for social activism?
Yes and no. An artist, from my point of view, is not a politician, but art can be political. But if you really, really want to change something, I think you should go into Parliament. I think that art is something that you do for yourself and you do for, of course, you can, I consider that politics does inform my work, but I don't think I produce utilitarian art. In other words, the art is not used to do something. It's not a propaganda tool. I see art as a form of poetry. You can have a poem that's very politically aware and very strong, but the poet may not necessarily expect that poem to change the world immediately, but the poem itself has very complex and interesting form. So the form that you make your art in is also just as important as the content. And an artist is concerned with both. So I don't think that, well, the short answer is you can be politically aware in the work, but I don't think the work is a tool for changing the world in that way. Politics is more effective, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it Dexter? Yeah.
Yeah, so the
He
curator.
wants to change his question now. Okay. That's cool.
Oh, I thought the curator question was quite interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
I should answer that one. Okay. Yes, I mean, curators not usually will approach you to make a show. So an artist cannot necessarily choose a curator. Curators usually work with museums and they work with galleries. And they will go and look for the artists. And are you an artist?
No.
Are you a curator? You're a photographer?
Yeah.
Okay. And is it art, photography, or
I am interested in disabled people fully.
so you take photos of disabled people? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So you go and look for the work yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So with a curator, you can't. I mean, if you went to a curator, they'd say you were too keen and they wouldn't give you any work. You know, so it's very different. I mean, the art world is funny. You know, you have to not show that you're desperate, even if you are. Otherwise, you won't get anything. So it's a kind of funny game. But yeah.
And can you remind me? I know it's about commercialism, wasn't it? It was.
I was just wondering if the commercial market ever pushed you to make work that was more commercially viable or saleable, or if they let you continue to pursue what your interests were in.
I would put that question in a different way. And the way that I would put that question would be, you know, because I don't separate commerce from the work that you want to do. I think that you should do what you're doing, and you should, you know, you don't need to compromise to be commercially, because you want to be commercially viable. You know, the work itself should be commercially viable and still be saying important things. It's not mutually exclusive. You know, I think that you can do both at the same time. You know, there's this distaste about mammon, you know, distaste about money. There's something immoral. Money is considered immoral. And so people want to feel that their real work is separate from something that makes money. And I don't think that's necessarily right. I think that if the work has enough substance, just because people want to buy the work, it doesn't make the work bad. And an artist shouldn't start thinking, oh, I have to create this other area where, you know, that one sells, but the really good work, you know, that doesn't sell. I think that, I mean, within my own practice, I do things that I know fully well perhaps will not sell, but I also do other things that I know will sell, you know, but I combine both. And the stuff that sells supports the stuff that I know won't sell. But I don't think that, and usually I've been very wrong on that anyway, because a lot of the things I thought wouldn't sell sold. So, you know, so I don't think you can draw that line and say, oh, well, you know, the good work, you know, when I'm making the good work, I starve. You know, when I make the bad work, I eat. You know, I mean, that doesn't work. Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting that it takes you by surprise what you think. You think, okay, this is definitely going to sell, and it doesn't. The things you don't think. Probably quite an interesting lesson for artists who are trying their best to please. Yeah. Who else was asking a question? It's really better not to be shy and ask a question.
Yeah.
Yes, question at the back there. Okay.
Can you talk a bit about post-colonialism and to what extent it influences your work?
Okay. For those who don't quite know what that means, or basically, the issue of in the 80s and the 90s, within the universities, and colleges and a number of academics wanted to actually challenge the history of the power relations between the colonies, those who were colonized, and the West. And so a lot of political awareness, so there were writings like, there was a magazine called Thought Text. And so the art of people from the South, mainly Africa, Asia, those who were mainly colonized by European countries, the magazine featured the art, and it's about sort of, challenging the history of oppression of those people by people who colonized them. And so your question was, what did you ask me in relation to colonialism?
To what extent does it influence your work?
Well, I mean, as somebody, I was born in London, but I grew up in Nigeria. My parents are Nigerian. Nigeria used to be a colony of Britain. Therefore, my own identity and my own history has been influenced by that fact. And that's why I'm interested in looking at the relationship between Nigeria and Britain. And that's why my work is informed by that history, which is my own history.
This is when you were described as a post-colonial hybrid, is it?
Yes, but that's also part being kind of two fingers in a way, just joking about the whole mess, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes?
You mentioned that you got a Paul Hamlin grant, and I wondered whether you applied for that or whether they asked you to apply for it and what you actually used that £30,000 for.
I used it very well. Actually, I used to go to, there was a shop called Duffer of St. George, and I like fashion, so I bought some nice clothes. I went to Amsterdam.
On a research trip?
Yes, and then I kept some of the money, did some work, but it wasn't just that, no, I enjoyed some of the money. And, but that's the good thing about the Paul Hamlin Award, is that they don't actually say what you should use the money for. They just say you can have, in those days, I think now it's about £50,000, but it was £30,000 in those days, and they just said, you can have that money to support your career, but they won't ask you, what you're spending it on. But it was very good because, I was able to give up my day job, and then, in those days, £10,000 a year was, it was good. So I painted in a squat anyway, so I didn't need to pay for studio space. I mean, you can't get a squat now to paint in. But, in those days, you could get a squat and paint, and, and so you could save a lot of money. And, so that's what I used it for.
I haven't told Yinka we're not leaving the project space at the end of the contract, so we're going to hang out for a bit longer. Are there any more questions? Okay, these are the final questions then.
Which black artists inspired you to make work?
There are a lot of black artists I admire. There's David Hammonds, American artist. Kara Walker, I like very much. Fred Wilson, I like very much. Leonardo Drew, and in Britain, there are people like Sonia Boyce, Keith Piper, Rotimi Fani Kayode, Nigerian photographer, is passed away now. Many others. Mona Hatoum, she's from Palestine, but she's many, yeah.
And the last question.
Hello. My question is really about the show that you did in the Icon, which I think was in the late 90s in Birmingham.
Gosh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. And I'm just, for me, that was really incredibly important because I wasn't necessarily able to come to London to see shows here or to go internationally. Do you still see it's really relevant to produce work in other parts of the UK?
Well, no, actually, you know, it's good that you mentioned that because actually my early career really began in the regions because I was given a lot of opportunities in the regions. I was at, you know, Blue Coat Gallery in Liverpool, Llandudno, I showed Sheffield. Yeah, I mean, it was very, very important to show, you know, group show, Manchester City Gallery. I mean, there were many original spaces before I was able to actually, you know, start showing in fancy galleries in Mayfair. You know, I actually, you know, showed in the regions a lot first. So, no, very, very important part of my career. And, you know, and I still do when I get invited to. Yeah.
There's two quick questions that I missed. I didn't really, but I'm back to that. Nobody puts their hands up and then everybody does. There's a real quick one on the front row and there's one at the back. We'll take that one first.
I was just wondering whether you have visited the Art and Empire exhibition at the Tate Britain, or if you had any comments about it.
Well, I should slap wrist for that. I've been traveling a bit with my work, so I've not really been. I do intend to go if it's not finished yet. I hope not. And unfortunately, I was actually meant to talk, you know, and then I had a horrible cold and I could not go and attend that talk. That was when the horrible flu was going around. I've been reading about it and I should try and see it before it closes. I hope it's not closed yet.
I took my way into that because I knew you were speaking from the platform. And after blagging my way into that, they then said you weren't there because you went very well. So,
yes.
So that serves me right for blagging in.
Unfortunately. You know, mere models, yeah.
There's a question on the front.
Yeah, just one tiny one. As a consequence of the fourth plinth, you made lots of little cabby frames. Can you kind of expand on that a bit?
Well, no, I mean, it's very simple, really. When I, you know, get into a taxi and they say, what do you do? And I say, you know, I'm an artist. And they say, oils or watercolors. And I say, well, you know, did you see the ship in a bottle in Trafalgar Square? I say, oh, you done that? Wow, you know. So, and then, you know, conversation starts, and you know, and somehow we always end up talking about Tracy Emin for some reason.
I think that might be a really great place to end on. Tracy couldn't make it tonight. Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. Yinka, thanks a lot.